What the hell just happened? Private First Class Danny Reeves was on the floor, his right arm twisted behind his back at an angle that promised serious pain if he moved even slightly. Beside him, Specialist Mike Torres was in a similar position, a forearm pressed against his throat just firmly enough to make breathing an adventure. The old man who'd been sleeping peacefully on the break room couch 3 seconds ago was now very much awake, his eyes scanning the room for additional threats with the cold efficiency of a weapon system acquiring targets. If you believe that some instincts never sleep, type "ready" in the comments before we continue. Fort Bragg in August was an exercise in heat management. The North Carolina humidity wrapped around everything like a wet blanket, making even simple tasks feel like endurance tests. For the soldiers of the 82nd Airborne Division, this meant finding any excuse to spend time in air-conditioned spaces between training exercises. The day room in Building 4217 had become a refuge, its ancient window unit rattling out cool air with the determination of machinery that refused to acknowledge its obsolescence. The furniture was standard Army issue. Vinyl couches that stuck to bare skin, metal folding chairs, a television permanently tuned to sports or news depending on who controlled the remote. It was in this unremarkable space that Dale Hutchins had settled down for an afternoon nap. He was visiting the base for a reunion of Vietnam-era veterans, one of those annual gatherings where old men told old stories and pretended they didn't feel their mortality pressing closer with each passing year. At 76, Dale looked every minute of his age. His hair had surrendered to white decades ago. His face carried the topography of hard years, deep lines carved by sun and stress and whatever else he'd seen that he never talked about. He'd wandered into Building 4217 looking for a bathroom and found the day room instead. The young soldiers inside had barely acknowledged him, assuming he was someone's grandfather, lost and confused by the maze of identical buildings that defined military base architecture. Dale had asked if he could rest for a few minutes. They'd shrugged and pointed to the couch. Within 5 minutes, he was asleep, snoring softly, hands folded across his chest like a man at peace with the world. Private Reeves saw opportunity. At 22, he was the barracks comedian, always looking for content for his social media accounts, always pushing boundaries that wiser men knew to respect. His phone was already recording when he pulled the marker from his pocket. "Watch this," he whispered to Torres and the 3 other soldiers who had gathered to witness the spectacle. "Grandpa's about to wake up looking like a clown." Torres hesitated. "I don't know, man. That's kind of messed up. He's old." "Exactly. What's he gonna do about it?" Reeves uncapped the marker and approached the sleeping veteran with the confidence of a man who had never encountered real consequences. The marker touched Dale's forehead. What happened next would be reviewed on security footage, analyzed in training presentations, and discussed in hushed tones for years afterward. The footage showed Dale's eyes opening in the same instant the marker made contact. Not the slow, confused awakening of a man roused from deep sleep. His eyes simply opened, already focused, already alert, as if sleep had been a choice he could abandon at will. In the next frame, his right hand had seized Reeves' wrist. In the frame after that, his left hand had Torres by the collar. By the 4th frame, less than 2 seconds after the marker touched skin, both young soldiers were on the ground, immobilized by joint locks that their combatives' instructors would have struggled to escape. Dale's body had moved from prone to combat-ready without any apparent transition, like a video that had skipped frames. He was on his feet, knees slightly bent, weight balanced, free hand raised in a guard position that predated modern martial arts by decades. His breathing hadn't changed. His heart rate, according to the fitness tracker Reeves was wearing, had increased by only 8 beats per minute. The old man wasn't excited. He wasn't scared. He was simply operational. "Room clear." Dale's voice cut through the shocked silence. The question wasn't rhetorical. His eyes were still moving, still scanning, still processing the environment for threats that existed only in memories that refused to fade. "Sir, sir." Torres's voice was strained, the forearm against his throat making speech difficult. "We're soldiers, American soldiers. You're at Fort Bragg. You're safe." Something shifted in Dale's eyes. The targeting system powered down. The combat stance softened. He looked at the two young men he had pinned to the floor, then at the marker lying on the carpet where Reeves had dropped it, then at the other soldiers who stood frozen against the walls, unsure whether to intervene or run. "Ah," Dale said. He released both men and stepped back, his posture returning to the harmless-looking slouch of an elderly veteran. "You tried to draw on my face." It wasn't a question. Reeves scrambled to his feet, rubbing his wrist where Dale's grip had left white marks. "I'm sorry, sir. It was just a joke. I didn't mean to—" "To what? Assault a sleeping man?" Dale's voice carried no anger, only a kind of weary patience. "In my day, that would have earned you a blanket party. Your lucky times have changed." The door to the day room opened. Command Sergeant Major William Foster stepped through, his presence immediately commanding attention from every soldier in the room. At 53, Foster was the senior enlisted advisor for the entire brigade, a position that combined the authority of a general with the practical wisdom of someone who had actually done the jobs he now supervised. He took in the scene with a quick assessment of a career soldier. Two young men looking embarrassed and sore, an old veteran standing calmly in the center of the room, other soldiers pressed against walls like they were trying to phase through them. Then Foster's eyes locked onto Dale, and his entire demeanor changed. The command presence softened. His shoulders dropped. A smile spread across his face that transformed him from intimidating authority figure to delighted fan meeting his hero. "No way," Foster said. "No goddamn way. Dale Hutchins." Dale turned, studied the sergeant major for a moment, then nodded. "Billy Foster, last time I saw you, you were a staff sergeant trying not to puke during mountain warfare training. You remember that?" Foster laughed. "That was 24 years ago. I remember everyone who didn't quit." Foster walked forward and embraced Dale with the warmth reserved for genuine respect. Then he turned to face the young soldiers, his smile fading into something more instructional. "Do you idiots have any idea who you just tried to prank?" Reeves shook his head, still rubbing his wrist. Torres stayed silent. The others simply stared. Foster pointed at Dale with the reverence usually reserved for religious relics. "This is Master Sergeant Dale Hutchins, retired, 19 years in Special Forces. 3 tours in Vietnam with May-Visog, running missions so classified that most of them are still redacted. And in 1977, he was one of the original operators selected for a new unit. Some of you might have heard of it. It's called Delta Force." The silence that followed was absolute. Every soldier in the room knew what Delta Force was, the Army's premier special operations unit. The men who handled the missions that didn't officially exist. The quiet professionals who worked in shadows and never sought recognition. Dale wasn't just a member, Foster continued. He helped build it. He wrote the selection standards. He designed the training protocols. The close-quarters combat techniques you learn in combatives class. Half of them came from this man's experience staying alive in places where survival was measured in seconds. Reeves looked like he might vomit. "Sir, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. The marker thing, it was stupid. I was just—" Dale held up his hand, cutting off the apology. "You were bored. You were showing off. You saw an old man and assumed he was harmless." He paused, letting the words land. "That assumption will get you killed someday. Maybe not by a 76-year-old taking a nap, but by the enemy who doesn't look like an enemy. By the civilian who isn't a civilian, by the moment you let your guard down because someone didn't fit your picture of a threat." He reached down and picked up the marker from the floor, examining it like a curious artifact. In Vietnam, the VC used children as spotters, grandmothers as sappers. The most dangerous man I ever fought was 63 years old, weighed maybe 130 pounds, and killed 4 Special Forces soldiers before we stopped him. He didn't look dangerous either. Dale walked to Reeves and placed the marker in his hand. "Keep this. Every time you look at it, remember that appearances are the first lie combat tells you. Learn to see past them, or they'll put you in a box." Foster dismissed the other soldiers, keeping only Reeves and Torres behind. The day room emptied quickly, everyone eager to escape the lingering intensity of the encounter. When the door closed, Foster's expression shifted from instructor to something more personal. "Dale, I'm sorry about this. These kids, they don't know. They haven't been anywhere yet. That's not their fault." Dale settled back onto the couch, apparently intending to finish his interrupted nap. They'll learn or they won't. Most of them will never face real combat. They'll do their 4 years, get their GI Bill, tell stories at barbecues about the time they were in the army. That's fine. That's actually the goal. We do what we do so most people never have to. Torres found his voice. "Sir, that thing you did, the way you woke up, the way you moved, how is that even possible? You were dead asleep." Dale closed his eyes. "No, I was resting. There's a difference. Sleep is a vulnerability. Rest is a choice. I learned to rest without ever fully sleeping sometime around 1968. Never unlearned it." He folded his hands across his chest, returning to his previous position. "Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to finish what I started. I promise not to hurt anyone else unless they deserve it." Foster led the 2 young soldiers out of the day room, leaving Dale to his rest. In the hallway, he stopped them both with a look. "What you saw in there, that's what 40 years of combat conditioning looks like. His nervous system was rewired by experiences you can't imagine. The man hasn't slept normally since before your parents were born. You think that's a blessing? It's a curse he's carried every day since Vietnam." He let that sink in. The instincts that saved his life 1,000 times won't let him go. He can't turn them off. Every time someone touches him unexpectedly, some part of his brain thinks it's 1969 and someone's trying to slit his throat in a jungle. You didn't just try to prank an old man. You triggered a weapon system that's been armed for 5 decades. Reeves' eyes were wet. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "Now you do." Foster's voice softened slightly. "Go find him tomorrow. Ask him to tell you about his service. Actually listen, learn something. That's how you make this right." Reeves did exactly that. He found Dale at the reunion breakfast the next morning and asked respectfully if he could hear some stories. Dale studied him for a long moment, then nodded and pointed to an empty chair. They talked for 3 hours. Dale didn't share anything classified, but he shared enough. Enough for Reeves to understand what it meant to serve in the shadows. Enough for the young private to realize that the silly prank he'd attempted could have ended very differently if Dale's trigger finger had twitched instead of his training holding. Enough to change how Reeves looked at every veteran he ever met afterward. When they parted, Dale shook his hand. "You'll be all right," the old man said. "You're young enough to learn and humble enough now to listen. That's more than most." Reeves never forgot those words. 15 years later, as a sergeant first class with 2 combat deployments behind him, he would tell the story of the day he tried to prank a founding member of Delta Force. He told it as a lesson about assumptions, about respect, about the invisible wars that veterans carry long after the shooting stops.